Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Raising Millionaires podcast. I am your co-host, Roger Bryan, and this is
Richard Lorenzen.
Today, we are going to be talking about the things that keep people broke. These are the habits or the decisions that people make that stop them from building wealth, becoming wealthy, and moving along their journey to financial freedom. We're going to talk a little bit about the markets, Powell's comments today, talk about interest rates because that's been a hot topic, talk about AI and what we're doing in that space, and then sprinkle in a little bit about our entrepreneurial journey. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. The rest of this is brought to you by our not real sponsor, V8 Energy. At any time, V8 Energy, if you would like to write us a check to be our official sponsor, I would accept that check. Send me a note. I'll send you the mailing address. So, Richard.
All right.
The idea that people make decisions that keep them broke.
Yep.
I mean, that's not our concept, right? There is a book that I probably talked about 100 times, which is called A Framework for Understanding Poverty, that sets some of the core foundational elements of 3 different sections of, I don't want to call it society as much as an economy, but it's like there are the poor, there are the working or middle class, and then there are the wealthy. And that the working class, not necessarily called the middle class, is very large in this context. So that you have the poor, the working class, and the wealthy are not necessarily the 1%ers, but more like the 0.1%ers when it comes to mindset.
Yeah.
So let's dive into this. The number one thing that starts this entire conversation, the number one reason people are broke, or why they think they're broke, is that they think that it's because they don't make enough money. The curveball to that is there are plenty of doctors, lawyers, people, professionals that make a lot of money that are broke. So it's not always about the amount of money you make. It's about how you use it. What are your thoughts when I say that?
No, it's exactly right. You can find people at all levels of income who are living paycheck to paycheck, right? And so it certainly helps if you earn more, but again, like you said, it only helps if you're doing the right things with the money that you earn. And so there are a lot of ways to get wealthy when you're on a relatively low income. There are also a lot of ways to stay broke, even when you're making $1 million a year. So let's unpack that.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories actually came from a nanny that we interviewed, and this might have been like 4 years ago, I think pre-Carter, where we asked, the nanny was working for a family, and we asked her why she wanted to leave, and she's like, this is the craziest thing. She's like, I work for 2 doctors. They live in one of the nicest houses in the city, but they don't turn on their heat. And she asked them one time, and the wife told her in frustration, it's like, we can't afford heat, right? They're driving 2 6-figure cars. They're living in Ohio, a multi-million-dollar house is a little different than in New York. Like this might be a 6,000 or 7,000 square foot home, maybe even larger. But they were literally broke because they were living a lifestyle, right? On the surface, the most beautiful cars, the biggest house, the nicest clothes. But the kids never had any good food to eat. They couldn't even afford to turn on their heat. I probably think that story is a little bit of an extreme story, but that's why the nanny wanted to leave. She's like, it's just not a good environment for their kids because of the way their parents are like being irresponsible. That's kind of crazy.
That almost goes to the level of like some kind of a psychological issue with money, maybe. Because where's all that going?
Now, be careful with that. Influencers and marketers. Okay, yes, many of them have psychological issues. Let's not detract from that. But most of them are broke, and a lot of them earn mid-6 figures.
Yep, true.
So it's not uncommon in any realm.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone was listening to this video, though, that was just like flat broke, poor, lack economic opportunity, and they're listening to this and like, yeah, I'd love to have those problems. What do you say to someone like that?
Well, that's a different situation. And now we're talking about how do you go from earning, let's say, very little or nothing to earning something where you can save money every month. Um, it's really situation specific, but I think you have to change in a lot of ways, change your environment, right? You have to get around different opportunities, different people, places where you can learn new skills, develop new skills, um,
New networks,
new
right?
networks. Yeah, like getting around the right people. It really, I feel like that's really specific to somebody's situation. But you know, I always say that we've said this on other episodes. The fastest way out of that, to me, if you're looking to earn money or start a business, is to develop some sort of a high-paying skill and sell that skill. I still believe that that's the
Absolutely.
lowest
No,
cost,
you're 100% spot
least
on.
friction way.
I even look at like my own brother, love him to death. He is happy, probably happier than most. And he works in landscaping, not as a business owner, but just like he's just turned 41 and he is a day to day guy that goes out and cuts the lawn. Now, his boss, likely a multi millionaire with as big as the business is, but throughout his life, in his 20s and even in his 30s, there was always that idea of wanting more, but never willingness to put forth the effort to learn a new skill, right? Work your 12-hour days, 6 days a week, get your pay with overtime during the summer, plow during the winter. You have a life, you have a survival mechanism, but never willing to apply the extra effort to get that additional skill that could then increase the income or to like he would probably qualify as the king of side hustles, right?
Mm.
He's done the junk stuff, he's done the flea market stuff, he's tried to do the online stuff, he does side gigs in the landscaping stuff, but it's all very linear in skill set and it's never been leveling up capabilities in order to earn more money. That
Mm.
still goes back to, though, he's the norm, right? The person that levels up is not the norm. Getting
Yeah.
into that top 10% or top 1% does take an extra level of effort that you might not get in most
Yeah.
out of most people.
I think so. When I think about it, I guess you need to obtain a skill that's like a, let's say, a high ticket, right? Like a high paying skill, which I guess in today's economy a lot of times is like something in technology or in professional services. You either need some kind of a high paying skill that you can develop and leverage, or because like you mentioned landscaping, like to me that's more of a low ticket skill because each customer, like the customer value of each customer is lower, maybe. So in that case, you would need to build some sort of a system and team that allows you to scale it.
Yep,
So you need to be willing to do one of those two things: either develop a higher ticket skill, or you're great at a low ticket skill and you develop the ability to be able to scale that skill through systems and people. Because, like you said, you can build a multi-million-dollar landscaping business, but there needs to be a willingness to build the systems and skill to do that.
yep. What about, and it's a tough world out there. It really is. The cost of housing, the
Yeah.
cost of groceries, the cost of healthcare, the cost of raising and sending kids to school.
Yep.
It's a lot of money. I'm going to say a statement and I want to know what you think. I have my own opinion, right? If you're living paycheck to paycheck and the second you get your paycheck, the money's already gone, is it the paycheck's fault or is it your habits?
I'd say for most people, it's their habits. Get with the exception that there are some exceptions out there. Like you might have ridiculous amounts of medical debt, right? Like I don't know, but for most people, I would say that America doesn't always have a good habit of saving money. That's documented. Like that's data, right? Like the majority of
Damn
Americans.
marketers.
Yeah, like the majority of Americans though are not saving, and there was a stat, and I should try to pull it up, but I know that they're certainly saving far less than 10% of their income, and that's the typical average American, not the special exceptions that maybe you have medical situation, whatever it might be, but most people are not saving an adequate percentage of their paycheck every month. So for most people, I think it's what you're doing with that paycheck, which is habits.
It is having, here's the brutal truth that your cup of Starbucks likely isn't making you broke, but it's keeping you broke, right? There are those certain things that you do throughout the month that add up to $50 or $100, whether it be Netflix, whether it be Starbucks, could be eating out 2 or 3 times a week, fast food, that simply transitioning those things from an expense to saving or investing over a small period of time can create an emergency fund. Then that can then spawn into being able to save. Not when I say save, I don't mean putting money in the bank and trying to earn interest on it, but saving in a way that allows you to invest for a future expense, like
Right.
buying a house. Or for me, what's always been important is like from a generational perspective, like how am I going to pre-position my kids to not carry the curses of my parents' generation, right? What money needs to be set aside for education, for first homes, cars, health expenses, travel, things like that that then allow them to have a wider horizon on the world. So I know we don't want to beat up on people and say that it's all their fault. The problem is, for the most part, it really is. No matter what your circumstances are, there's ways to get out of it if you just choose to.
Yep. And I would also say too that it's not just the purchases like maybe the daily Starbucks, which does add up for sure. Like I don't drink coffee, but I know it's something like $5 maybe for a
No,
coffee.
it
So
is. So I'm not a big Starbucks fan, but so the place that I take our cars, like to get tires or oil changes, right? I'll probably wait an hour. Next door is a Starbucks. I was just there yesterday. So normally I go through McDonald's every morning and I get a 99-cent large coffee. I
okay.
did the math. If I make it at home with pods, it's like 86 cents for 2 pods to make one large, and it doesn't taste as good as the McDonald's coffee fresh brewed. So I do that every day. But yesterday I went to Starbucks and I got a matcha latte. It was $5.90 plus then you get the whole tip thing and the girl's sitting there staring at you. So like, I paid $7 for a effing cup of tea so that I could, well, a latte, so I could sit there while I got an oil change and argued with the guy over an alignment. It's it's crazy to think that some people, that's their daily habit, right? 21 days of work a week times $5, $110. That could be your retirement depending upon your age.
No, it's 100% that's true. But it's not just the small stuff, it's also the big stuff. There are a lot of people going out buying, a car that's twice as expensive as what they really need. Or they're going on 3 vacations a year when they're not funding. There's nothing wrong with doing any of these things, but it's just that you have to prioritize first funding your 401 or your IRA or your kid's 529 or whatever those items might be for you. You have to prioritize those first. But there are a lot of people that are spending even on big items, not just the $5 on coffee. They're overspending on things that they really shouldn't be prioritizing.
No, I'm glad that you brought that up. I live in kind of BFE, Ohio, in between two middle-sized cities. And the number of, and I don't know the individuals driving them, right? It's not a comment about them as individuals, but trucks today run into the six figures,
Yeah.
right? And rental properties in this market, duplexes are 180,000, right? You can't really buy a single family home for much less, which is kind of interesting. But I look at those trucks and I think that, like, okay, if you're going to pay $120,000 for a new truck, you're probably financing it for 72 months. Sometimes they even do now, or what is it, 72 plus 12, 84-month financing on that, right? That same payment on a 15-year mortgage on a rental property would have you more than halfway paid off. You'd have an asset that is appreciated in value and a truck that's depreciated in value, and you're that much closer to a cash flowing asset. Now, not everybody wants to deal with rental properties. I understand that. But the math doesn't lie, right? If you're buying a $120,000 truck, you got to be taking that out, taking it away from your retirement. What, laugh now, cry later? Is that the American mantra?
I always thought it was funny if you go into it's here in New York City, you can go into the outer boroughs of like Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, and this isn't to generalize all these areas because there are some parts of Brooklyn and Queens and the Bronx that are super expensive and very high end. But you can go into some of the less high end areas of these boroughs, uh, downright neighborhoods you would not really want to live in that people try to get out of, and you can drive down any street and houses that are in very poor areas, very poor houses, very small houses, um and there you'll see a lot of them that will have an $80,000 BMW in the
Yes,
driveway
we see that here
you know
too.
And it always made me wonder, like I get that, you that might be your situation, like you're living in this particular part of Queens right now, and that's fine. But if you had a $40,000 car instead of the 80,000, maybe you wouldn't be living. It always kind of made me think a little bit, because it's interesting to see the juxtaposition of like these, poor, really run down houses, and then there's like this really expensive brand new car in the driveway. Um,
I want to be
I'm
careful how I say this next thing, but it's in line with this. So if I was to drive from where I am here in Canal Fulton, Ohio to Amish country, it's about a 30-minute drive, right, to get out into the country there. And along the way, there's this one trailer, right, mobile home. Kind of, it's not in a park, it's just off the side of the road. And for the longest time, you would drive by there, and there would be this beautiful BMW and this beautiful Escalade there, right? We're talking two 70 to $100,000 vehicles on a
mm,
trailer that had like grass growing out of the roof.
mm,
One day we drove by and it had burnt down.
mm,
And right, I looked at Krista and I'm like, that had to be a meth lab, right? That was
mm.
the only way I could explain why this place had completely disintegrated and the cars are now gone. Which I thought, I don't know, maybe that's the wrong way to say it, but it never, why were those like, those two cars by a house in like
Yes,
8%
that's
of the
the point.
surrounding area, a nice house with land, but there was a trailer there, right? I just don't get the decision.
Right. That's the point. What I'm saying is the difference, that what you're paying for maybe that $80,000 BMW versus what you could be paying if you were driving maybe like a Toyota, right? That difference could actually go if you want to buy a bigger house or move to a different area. That could actually fund that change if you want to do that. So again, it goes back to like there are big things and little things, I think, that in terms of habits, that can really hold you back, assuming assuming that you want to build wealth.
Assuming that you want to build, well, that's an interesting hook right there. I I think from I don't want to speak for you, but from my perspective, I assume that everybody, right, wants to make their life better over time. But that might not always be the case. Or they want to make life better for their kids. Like who doesn't want to make life better for their kids?
Hmm. So then, what are some of the habits we talked about, like the Starbucks coffee, but like what are some of the habits, generally speaking, that people are doing? So we can say one of them is like spending frivolous, kind of on day-to-day
Yeah,
things.
well
But
let's organize this. What are the 5 habits that people have that are keeping them broke? Right? And we're
okay.
not talking about like my dad when I was a kid telling me to shut off the light when I leave the room because that 3 cents a month is really going to make that much difference. But it is the small ticket frivolous spending that doesn't seem like a lot right now that adds up. It's the Starbucks coffee. It's the eating out. It's the buying the 5 or 10 or $20 knickknack for the kids every time you go to the store, right? The second one is that overspending on core needs. That's your house is too big, right? Your vehicle is too expensive. That's like if you people just want to show off. They want to seem wealthy when they're not. That can also include clothing,
Mhm.
right? The third one you said, right? It's not just about going on vacations when you're not funding your retirement. It's about the overall prioritization of resources. Most people think that if they only made more money, they could plan better, but that's not the case. You
Yeah.
plan better, and then you eventually have more money. The
Mm.
fourth one is zero allocation to spending in part of a pre-budgeting process, investing as part of a pre-budgeting process, right? I
Mm.
am going to commit 10% of my net take
Right.
home to this. And if I build that into my budget, then I don't tend to overspend on the other things.
Mhm.
And then the fifth one really is just about goal setting, right? We talk about this all the time. If you've got a destination you're going to, you
Yep.
tend to be more disciplined along the journey. If
Yep.
you have no destination, what's the point, right? Why even care?
Yep. No, that's right. I agree with that. You need to know where you want to go. You need to commit to a certain percentage that you're going to put towards getting there, and then you need to prioritize, before spending on the vacation or on the Starbucks or the car. Prioritize, hitting that percentage of income that you've committed to saving, and making sure it's going to the right accounts, whether it's the 401k for your retirement, whether it's a taxable brokerage, whether it's 529 for your kids. You need to prioritize getting those accounts funded first, and then you can spend whatever's left over. You can spend it however you want. Um, that's the way to get there.
Yeah,
Uh,
there was a study, and I mean, there's been plenty of studies around this, and I understand different parts of the country are different things. That there is like most people pray for a raise but never fix their habits, and in reality, there is a diminishing rate of return of quality of life at certain levels of income, right?
yeah,
As you make more, people tend to spend more. So their quality of life supposedly keeps rising, but as they do that, their happiness quotient can tend to fall off because then they start to position their lives in a fabricated manner, right? Where they're just trying to show off, but they don't actually get the reciprocation they think that they deserve for that, and it actually lowers their overall happiness. I don't remember the exact numbers, but like in average America, it was like something like 160 or $170,000 in income. And then at the higher extremes of that, it was like $360,000. That the quality of life is no better above those numbers. Now, again, you're a New Yorker. You hear those numbers, you're like, how would I pay my mortgage? But I'm
well,
talking about the general American
yeah.
economy, not the Chicago, LA, New York style numbers.
Well, there was a very famous study. This might be the one you're even thinking of. Several more than several years ago at this point, that said that basically I think it was $75,000 was the number that people need to meet like their basic needs to be happy. I think that was there was like this really big study that came out. I thought it was $75,000.
Well, that would
Um,
probably be before the deflation of the dollar value.
yeah, so again, like you have to take it with a grain of salt. So in 2010, there was a study done by I'm not sure which university did this, but they say that happiness peaks at $75,000 in income. Now, I can personally tell you that there are nuances to that, and that's not necessarily the case. Um, but when you factor it out over like the average of the United States, the average cost of living, I can see that being true in a lot of places. Um, at the same time, there was another interesting study that came out, and this was just in the last year. And I'm trying to remember where this was. Maybe it was Business Insider, but they specifically went to young people like Gen Z and whatever generations after that one. Is it Gen Alpha, whatever
Yeah, I
what
think they're the alphas.
and they said, how much money do you need to feel happy and basically safe? And those numbers were coming in at like anywhere from 300 to $500,000 was the median as far as what they felt like they needed to make to feel happy. So totally other end of the spectrum. Um, I don't know much about the sample of like who they spoke to. Maybe it was kids in New York. I don't know. Um, but it is true that overall, I think the point was maybe the point was after a certain level, like happiness peaks in income, and there's like a diminishing impact after that, and that I would agree with. It's
To a person with bad habits, though, they can make all the money in the world and they're still going to be broke and miserable.
that's right. Yeah, if you look at the people who are really wealthy, no matter how much money they have, they still have habits where they are they're cheap. Basically, would be
Mhm.
the short way to put it. Like, so side note, interesting story. Like, so John Rockefeller, and this was in the 1800s. Uh, they used kerosene lighting back then in houses. Like, they didn't have electricity yet. He knew what the average bill, like monthly bill for his kerosene in his house should be, and so he would challenge his kids. He had a bunch of kids to basically if they could lower the monthly kerosene bill from what he knew the average should be, he would pay them out the difference in the bill. So like if your bill is normally $100 a month and it comes in at 80, he would give them the $20 and split it between them. And so basically he was trying to instill a habit of like being frugal. Like they would run around the house turning off all the kerosene lamps all throughout the day to try to lower the bill so they could make the difference. Those types of habits, you'll see that a lot of wealthy people have those types of habits, and there's a reason why those habits help them get to where they are.
No, absolutely. It was interesting here because, and I'm gonna tie a couple things together. There's like this Bruce Lee quote that instead of buying your kids everything that you never had, teach them all the things that you wish you would have learned.
Yeah.
And what I'm starting to experience with Claire being in second grade, especially in a school in like a wealthier area, is that there are these, they're almost monthly, if not like bi-weekly fads popping up,
Yeah.
right? We talked about the American Girl doll thing. Like within 2 weeks now, it was the Lafufus, the Labubus from Pop
Labubu.
Mart that have taken over like
Yeah.
everything. And now everybody's got them on the bus and everybody's talking about them. And the American Girl dolls have been sick for 2 weeks, sleeping in the corner. That's what Claire says. They're sick and they're resting. And she's good. She's really good because apparently these stuffed animals protect you from bad dreams. So for like a couple nights, she would tell me, I can't fall asleep because I'm having bad thoughts. And I'm sitting there trying to talk her through, like, hey, visualize yourself being down in Myrtle Beach on vacation. You are in control of your thoughts. And it took like 3 days before I'm like, damn it. She's actually trying to get me to buy her one of these stuffed animals that captures her bad dreams. And I talked to Krista. I'm like, okay, I'm looking for them online. I found used ones on Facebook Marketplace, right? I'm not going to spend $200 on one of these things. I can get them like for 30 or $40. And she's like, we have to be careful because the kids that she's seeing with these new things, she's like, I'm hearing their parents talk. And their parents are arguing about money, but the mom wants to spoil the kids and the dad wants to do this. And it's like, it's not about the toy, it's about the family's habits of spending. And if you're not careful, you're going to instill bad habits. Luckily, we talk about these things, and I'm like, man, I didn't see that. Right. I guess if I go to the flea market and find one for $5, probably won't right now. It's a little bit different. But that idea, like, oh my goodness, this is just new to second grade. I don't know if you're experiencing it at all, but man, Carter still can get by on his 50-cent cars. But Claire, all of a sudden, it's these new dolls and these new things, and it's crazy.
Well, you know, the other thing that's hard with kids now, especially relevant to like the time we live in 2025, is that they see like when we were kids, when we wanted something, like we had to go to the store and find it.
Yep.
But now like they see that it's so easy for me to pull just something up on Amazon and click and like, you know, either a couple hours or at the latest the next day, it's on our doorstep.
Oh, in line with this, I told Claire, I'm like, you can't just go onto Amazon and buy a Labubu or a Lafufu, whatever the heck they're called. So the next day she comes home from school. She's like, oh, Dad, you got to go to Pop Mart. I'm like, oh, God. She's going and she's asking these kids, like, where do you get them? How can I get one? And it's hard to say no to those things. And you kind of do deflect a little bit. But, right, I think that, like, I had a conversation with Carter. Was this, because we've probably been in the car on Saturday or Sunday. I'm like, Claire, around the age of 3, started understanding the concept of stock, right? The idea that on her birthday, she got to pick a company. And I started trying to get Carter to understand. It would have been on Sunday because we were sitting outside of an outlet. And we're sitting there in the car and we're talking. And he's like, I want to get a new truck. I'm like, what kind? He's like, Hot Wheel monster truck. I'm like, would you rather own the monster truck or do you want to own the company? He's like, what does that mean? So we
Yeah.
went into a conversation about stock. We started talking about Mattel, who owns Hot Wheels. And like, he's like, oh, I don't have any money to buy that. And he's like giving me his wallet. He's got like $1 in it. I'm like, well, let me show you how to do that. I love having those kind of conversations with a 3-year-old. It's like the greatest thing in the world.
I know it's so we've recently gotten into, especially with my 5-year-old and a little bit with the 4-year-old, gotten into like every time he receives money, creating the habit of like some of it gets set aside for savings, some of it we give to charity or tithing, and then the rest of it you can spend it however you want. But it's getting harder and harder to do that kind of stuff in an age where there's just so much, and there's so much peer pressure too, but so much
Mm-hmm.
instant gratification because you can just literally get anything you want off your phone with the touch of a button. This could be a whole other show. Uh,
No, it could be. And I think like we're coming up on 30 minutes, so we'll probably save the rest of this so that we can do our normal
yeah.
markets and AI conversations and things like that. But I think this is a really important topic about the habits of wealth. I, I'll end with I can remember when I lived in Washington, D.C., where I was probably more on the conservative side than in a very liberal city. And my friends used to make fun of me because when we'd be out at the bars, you have all of the people in the political sphere, like the interns and stuff. I'm not talking
Yeah.
about like real politicians. And I had a habit of making people cry at the bar when we would get into conversations about things like this.
Eh.
Right? Like, and I would just lay into them. I'm like, no, everybody's got the same chance. If they just decide that they want more, they can have more. I'm like, here's my story. Here's where I came from. Here's what I did. I will end this conversation by acknowledging that not everyone gets a fair shake at life. We're born in the United States, huge advantage, right? I'm a white middle-aged male, right? I've had the most advantages that anybody can possibly have in this American economy. It's different for women, it's different for people of color, it's different for people from other countries. There's good and bad in that. There are people that have come as immigrants that have built massive businesses on the back of their hard work. So don't take this as an attack on you as an individual. We're talking about the macro, and
Yep.
it's going to be different for you. You have to accept it, and if you don't, that's great. Roast us in the comments.
That's exactly right. And we're talking about the habits that are within your control for building wealth, right? We recognize that there are also things outside of our control in the environment that we can't control.
I remember
Um,
one weekend I made 3 girls cry, and my friend said they were going to stop taking me out with them if I didn't quit. Oh,
you're the life of the party.
the good old days. Um, okay, so Powell comes out and
Markets.
says he thinks stocks are overvalued and that is going to play a role into future decisions.
You don't say.
Yeah, I mean, I can't fight this market, right? I was looking at what has happened this year and looking at what my investments have done, and they've done okay. And it's not like anybody is sitting here with a crystal ball that's like, oh, I'm going to sell at the beginning of April. I'm going to buy back in at the middle, the first week of April, but I'm going to buy into the AI tech trade and I'm going to ride this all the way up, right? You could have. There's probably some people out there that hit all of that perfectly or shorted
Yeah.
the market going into Liberation Day and then bought the market long in tech and AI and have made massive amounts of money. I kind of just stayed steady and done okay. But man, this market just doesn't want to slow down. So I kind of like what Powell's saying. It's like, hey, we need a reality check before this becomes catastrophic.
Yeah, I mean, like I texted you the other day and I said that because I've had money that I've been wanting to put to work for the last few months. Basically, what are we in? We're in Q3. So like Q3 savings that I've been kind of holding off and even a little bit of Q2 on putting into the market because I was kind of just waiting for a pullback. All the indicators were saying we were going to have some sort of a correction at some point. The market was so high, and it just hasn't come. And you're stuck between this place of you want to put money to work, but you also don't want to, if you have a bunch of dry powder, you don't want to put it all in at the top because then when you get that correction, you can't average down. And so I've kind of resigned to, like just keeping, I think like almost 10% of my portfolio is in cash at this point, and I'm just keeping it in cash until I see a pullback. And if I miss opportunities along the way because it keeps going up, it's just that's just the opportunity cost because
Let me ask you a question on that, though. Okay, so there's two philosophical points of view in that conversation or in this equation that we at our age have experienced so many significant downturns that seem to come out of nowhere
yeah,
that we may psychologically be more scared of buying at the top than, say, a Gen Zer that's trying to ride maximum potential and doesn't care about the downside. The
yeah,
other side of that is that statistically speaking, this bull market has been so big and so long that we're well past correction phase historically, not short term being like the last 50, since 2008. That like me, that I'm always looking at the market from the negative perspective to try to protect downside or insure against downside, that we may be waiting for something that's not coming because we're seeing a technological advancement in AI that is pulling so much capital into it that limited supply of investment opportunities with maximum capital incoming means the prices have to continue to go up. And then Nvidia invests $100 billion in OpenAI. WTF? How does that play into this equation, and where did that come from?
And that was on the heels of them investing into Intel just like literally, what, 2 days before?
Well, that
Um,
move, once I learned about the dynamics of how the chips are used, how they're layered in technology, and what's going on with China, started to make a little bit more sense. But 5 billion versus 100 billion is a much different number,
oh,
right?
yeah.
Now, we talked last week too about the new restructuring of OpenAI, right? So that it can become a public company. You put $100 billion in that. What's the new valuation? It was at 500 billion before that investment. We've got to be pushing
So,
700 to a trillion.
yeah, what did we say OpenAI's valuation was last week? Was it 500 billion?
It was 500 billion.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah, there was a funny meme about this I'm trying to find that kind of speaks to like what this means for the market. And I found it here. I don't know if anyone can see this on the screen, but basically how the Dow hits 10,000 is, Nvidia puts 100 billion into OpenAI.
Nasdaq
OpenAI
hits
goes,
110 or hits 10,000.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Can you see that? And then
Yep.
so OpenAI goes and buys more chips from Oracle. Oracle goes up. They buy more chips from Nvidia, basically, and it just becomes this kind of never-ending cycle between these three or four companies that can, going to your point about that, maybe that pullback never coming. It can create this kind of self-perpetuating cycle of these three or four companies that power the indexes higher and higher and higher and higher.
There is, and I haven't seen it in a while, and I don't remember what it's called, but if you think about all of the debt in the world, right? The
Mhm.
amount of debt between corporations, private individuals, and nation states, like I don't remember, like if you compared the total world debt to the circulating supply of currency, it's some astronomical number. So it
Mhm.
begs to the question of who actually or whom actually owes whom when it comes to that debt. And if you were to take party A and party B that you have debt to each other and cancel them out and shrink it down to like the difference between the two, right? You get rid of China treasuries in
Yep.
exchange for US ownership in this, things like that. That was a bad example. That
Yep.
the actual floating debt is like 20 per 30% of the actual debt. 70% of it is recirculated debt between parties within 3 degrees of each other that could be canceled out. So now you show that circular motion, that 100 billion goes from here to here to here to here, but it's the same 100 billion, but it's now recorded as 300 billion,
Yes.
400 billion, or 500 billion. Are we creating artificial inflation that is going to be deflated at some time and cause catastrophic downturns?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the entire risk that you see, right, especially for the Nasdaq, but you could say the same thing for the S&P because it's so highly concentrated because it's weighted.
Oh,
Um,
oh, but there's a note on that. Oh, what's his name from CNBC? He did a historical study. This was just on today. That anytime in a bull market there is that concentration at the top of the index funds. He's like, this isn't new, right? He's like, if you go back at one time, it was GE and somebody else. You go back to the
okay.
previous cycle, it was these companies. He's like, it's normally 14 to 25% that we're not actually even in a high peak of concentration relative to previous bear markets. That was kind of new for me to hear. I can picture his face. Why can't
But
I think of
isn't
it?
but isn't the S&P the Mag 7 makes up like 30% of the S&P
Well,
right
today they were calling it the Mag 10.
now? Okay. Okay, fair. So it's diluted a little bit. Um, but going back to your original point of maybe that pullback's not coming, I think that's an interesting point. But I think we should be careful not to
Josh
give the
Brown,
impression
that's who
like
said it today. Josh Brown.
Josh Brown, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'll give Josh Brown. So Josh Brown, just to give him credit, was the one who posted this meme as well with the Nvidia OpenAI. Um, what was I saying? So for the market, though, it's not to say that the market's going to continually just go up in perpetuity every single day forever. But maybe it's true that we're not going to be seeing like that 15 to 20% correction. Maybe that's not happening. Um,
Well,
I don't
what's
know.
the trade-off of that? Because those types of corrections are actually considered to be healthy, right? Do we keep going up until we have to hit a 50 to 70% correction for restabilization and deflation of these circulated dollars?
Well, if we're saying that with the advancement of technology that pullback's just not coming, then
Okay, well, let's
that
talk about
negates.
that for a second because I can, in my own thought processes, see that with a market that is so heavily electronically traded, that in 97% of the cases that there is a base of stability in that, but there's also a trigger point, and you see this a lot in crypto, right? There's huge liquidations this week because of a small move tripped off um, larger positions that were on the opposite side of that. So
Right.
you get like a 2 or 3% move, which is healthy, but it triggers a 7% or 8% move in assets because then of the liquidations and the buying to cover or the selling to cover in some cases.
I mean, I'd be looking for like a 15% pullback, but maybe that's, I don't know. The other overarching point here, though, is that it's a cliche, but it's still true. Time in market is always better than timing the market, and
Oh
so
yeah, I've made
I'm
that mistake plenty of times.
so yeah. I mean, I'm violating one of my own rules by like sitting with an entire quarter's worth of cash waiting for a pullback to buy in, but it just feels like the market's so high that I want to have some insurance to average down if I need to. But most of the time, the amount of time that you're in the market is more important than trying to time a specific pullback or leg up, whatever it might be. Um,
I was looking for an article and I just found it that kind of ties together the first part of this podcast with this second part, especially from a Gen Z perspective. And the article is by Alex Herring, and the title of it is Young Adults Embrace Financial Nihilism with Risky Crypto Stock Bets as American Dream Feels Unattainable. If you start to layer in every part of the conversations that we're having, young Americans really feel like even what we've been able to experience in our generation is completely unattainable from them because they'll never be able to buy a house. So why not always risk it all in hopes of, like, it's almost become, the American dream's almost become a lottery instead of a process.
but the thing is, it's not because like if you're saving a certain percentage of your income every month, and even if your income isn't actively increasing through compound interest over time, your assets are going to grow, right? And so maybe it takes you 20 years instead of 10 because of just
Well, then
the
that's the
environment.
thing. How do you tell a 20-year-old to save for the next 20 years to be able to buy a house when you're 40
That's fair.
versus put it all in on a meme stock and hope that you can buy the house at 25?
But just the percentage of likelihood of that happening is just so you did send me that text. Was it last week? You sent me the text message about like
Oh, yeah, the new rule of seven. I thought that was
the new
hilarious.
rule of seven, which is basically I think it was $1,000 that you were starting with. So like
Yep.
you start with $1,000 and you keep putting it onto a risky option play in the hopes of tripling it on each play. So like a
Or risky
thousand
crypto. Yeah.
or crypto. So like $1,000 risky
I don't
option
know if
play
anybody
turning
can
into
see that.
3,000 exactly.
Yeah, that's the
And so
new
that
rule of seven. So the idea here is that this is a more of a Gen Z now believe the path towards wealth is risk ignorance. Take $1,000, invest it in options with a goal to 3 to 10x. Keep repeating until 1 million or zero. If zero, start again. So you invest 1,000, you get it to 3,000. You take that 3,000, you get it to 10, get it to 33, get it to 100, get it to 333, get it to a million. And if at any point you make the wrong call and it goes down to zero, you just start again. So really, your entire financial future is bet on $1,000. So all you have to do is figure out how to make $1,000 and roll the dice 7 times on black. Or actually, I guess that would be spin the wheel. Spin the wheel and just hope it doesn't come up on green one of those times, and you've got a 48% chance each time of winning. Come on,
so
Richard. That's the way to build wealth. What's wrong with you?
so just to run with that for a minute. Obviously, this is very risky. People shouldn't be thinking of doing this at
Oh,
home.
that's the
But
one thing too. When you split these out into reels, they lose the context of what we're saying.
yeah, so what I was going to say though is obviously this is very risky, and the amount of times you'd have to do it for it to work is who knows, right? But if you were to do this 100 times, right, risk $100,000, if it were to work, that's a 10x return on your 100K. Like that's actually a really good return. But again, like I have no idea what the probabilities would be of this actually. It I'm sure it's even less than 1 in 100.
Oh my goodness, Richard. I mean, we're talking one in the hundreds of millions, like not
Right.
one in 100.
Otherwise, every quant hedge fund could just close down and do this.
Exactly. That's the big thing. Okay, let me see this.
So this
What
is a
is
really stupid thing to do. And anyone who's in Gen Z watching this right now or Gen Alpha, don't do this. Like you have infinitely better chances of success uh, just saving a little bit of money each month and investing it into something.
success rate?
You probably have an even better chance of making $1 million with
You know
100K.
what's interesting though? The probability on this working is actually better than I thought, right?
You
It said there's a
calculating that
1
by
in 128 chance of that
1 in
working.
128?
Yeah.
According to what? What's the calculation that you're using to?
Well, okay, now I take that back. If you measure the success rate of the individual investment at 50%, then it's a 1 in 128 that you make it through all 7 layers. But if the win rate changes to below 50%, then you're using a P7 chance of getting there.
I wouldn't say it's a 50-50 chance of
No,
doubling.
it never is. And no, it's a 50-50 chance to be on the right side of that, but to
Right.
get the 3x each time, right, 300% return, I can only think of a couple times that I've been able to do that, right? And it's definitely not the norm. So then, one, you have to pick the right side of the trade, and then two, you've got to reach the multiple of
Yeah.
profit on the trade,
Right.
and that's where it's just astronomical.
So
It can't
don't.
even measure it.
Yeah.
In fact, its exact words is using this 7-step 3x compounding strategy is microscopically small. That's the exact words that it uses.
Microscopic. Yeah. So maybe you don't do this, but
And
yeah.
if you didn't watch this part of the podcast, but you saw the reel on this and you did do it, good on you.
Yes.
All right.
All right.
Um,
We should
let's
wrap.
talk a little bit about
I've
oh,
got 4 minutes.
4 minutes. Oh yeah, okay, because we started a little late because of me. The last thing that I want to talk about then was AI or content. AI or content. So on the content side of thing, I saw this video by Gary Vee over the weekend where he's doing this new thing where he's screaming a lot more and throwing his hat and walking away from the camera, trying to create greater impact. And one of the things he was talking about is how people aren't paying attention to the fact that every platform needs different content, right? When we restarted this podcast and I started repurposing the content, it was the exact same content to all 10 social media channels, right? Post to Instagram, the other 9 channels. Now, I'm not paying attention to X. I'm getting 0 engagement. It's garbage, but I'm not paying attention to it. We noticed that when we posted this content to LinkedIn, it was not matching the audience that LinkedIn thought I had. And we went from 800 down to like 10 points of engagement on it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Instagram, every week we're getting a new video with 1,000, 3,000, 4,000, right? The scope is starting to increase. YouTube, now there's 3 different types of content on YouTube. There's the shorts, which I can post one short, get 1 view, then the next short can get 1,100. No difference between the two. So 1 view or 0 views is confusing to me, right? Algorithmically, I don't understand that. But what I did see is like in the middle term, like the 5-minute videos are starting to do really well, right? 30, 50, 100 views. The podcasts are still slacking, although I'm doing a different format of text in there. TikTok, still a fraction of Instagram. The reason that I say all of this is, and I think you saw this because you liked the one post, starting to experiment with like images, carousels, different types of reels and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I do think it's important to understand that every platform needs different content. And as we continue to work through this process of finding our voice in this space,
Yep.
it's going to be important to be looking at all of that. And I'm totally open to your ideas on like how content can differentiate between channels, or if you know somebody we can talk to that might have a better understanding of how this works.
I think we should talk to somebody who really understands the strategy behind it. I know a couple people we could try to set up some meetings with, because it
We're
is
making
true.
progress, but we both agree, like we're missing that hook, that final piece, that
There needs to
puzzle
be
that
a
pulls.
hook, and then there are different formats that work better for different channels too. So we should, if we really want to start zeroing in on specific, like on Instagram or on YouTube, we should probably get more educated on what specific formats for that channel work best.
And you don't
Um,
need to make them all work. You get one working really well, and you can get a
right.
base going, and then you can just build off of that. All right,
Yep.
I know you got to jump. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this week on the Raising Millionaires podcast. Next week, we're going to talk about something. We'll see you then.
All right.
Bye.